Okay, so join me today as I build the most expensive AliExpress watch that I've ever built. What is up, legends? Jason from JB Watch Mods here, back with another build, and today we're building the most expensive watch I've ever built using parts from AliExpress. Now there's two things that jack up the price of this watch compared to a standard AliExpress build, and those are a titanium case and a carbon fiber dial. So the case we're using is a Tudor Pelagos Homage case. Now it's full titanium, 42mm, and comes in just under 48 grams. This is a beast of a case and one that I've had my eye on for a long time. Now we're using a carbon fiber dial that has a blue weave through it. I think this should match the ceramic bezel insert of the Pelagos case just perfectly. Now don't get me wrong, this is still a relatively affordable build, but as far as AliExpress NH35 parts go, these parts are right at the top of that list. So let's jump in and see how this one looks because I cannot wait. Alright guys, so let's jump into this build. Now the first thing we need to do is get this beautiful dial attached to our movement. Now in order to do that, we need to trim 2 feet off the back of the dial. Now the way I like to do this is by grabbing my side cutters and holding the dial foot at the base and then wiggling the dial back and forwards until that dial foot snaps off. Repeat the process for the other side, and then you're left with a small stump on the back of the dial which will need to file off. Now you can use a small file to file these nubs down, or you can do like I do and grab a small Dremel just to sand those nice and flat. I like using the Dremel option now because it means that I don't have to exert any pressure onto the dial to remove those nubs, which for me minimises any risk of damaging the dial. Now once you've got those nubs sanded down, be sure to give that dial a good clean because the last thing you want are those metal filings going through your movement. Now if you're wondering why this carbon fibre dial looks like brass on the underside, well, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that they use a brass blank dial and just lay the carbon fibre over the top. Unfortunately, from my research, I don't think you can buy a full carbon fibre dial for an NH35 just yet. And I'm not even sure if that's possible, to be honest. Actually, I'm really intrigued by the Tissot PRX Forged Carbon Fibre Edition watch. I think that could be a really cool watch to pull apart and see what it looks like from the inside out. Anyway, let's get ready to fit the hands to this movement. Now in order to do that, we need to get the movement to 12 AM. Now to do that, we pull the crown out and wind it over until that date wheel flicks over. Then we know we're at 12 AM. So let's get our hour hand fitted first, and we do that by lining it up at 12 o'clock and pressing it down until the top of the hand sits flush with the hour post. Once you get that hour hand pressed on, rotate the movement over twice just to make sure that your hand clears all the indices and that it lines back up at 12 o'clock and the date wheel flicks over at the correct time. Once that's looking all good, we can put the movement back under the press and get ready to fit the minute hand. Now there are many different techniques of fitting hands. Now the way I like to do it is by putting the hand into the end of a ball of Rodico that I've rolled up into the shape of a cone. Now I like this technique because it doesn't damage the hands in any way, and it's also easy to clean off, which you can do by using the Rodico itself. And if you don't know what Rodico is, it's basically a jeweler's blue tack. Definitely a must have, so put it on your to purchase list if you don't already have it. And now we just wind that movement over again, just to make sure that our hands are clearing everything and that the date changes at the correct time. Now you'll see here that this second hand gives me a little bit of trouble. And what I figured out is that the tolerance on this second hand is just a little bit too tight. You can see here that I get the second hand just pressed on. And when I double check it here, I can see that the second hand isn't pressed on far enough and needs to be pushed down a little bit further. And now you can see here that I get that second hand pushed all the way down. So now I just need to double check and make sure that the clearances between all the hands are good, especially the second hand, seeing as that was a little bit fiddly to get on. So we just need to make sure that that second hand clears your minute hand and that the second hand isn't sitting too high up as to foul in the crystal when it's installed into the case. So now that I'm happy with the hand set, we can get ready to pair this movement into the case. Now the first thing I'll do is remove this dummy crown stem. Now I'll do that by using my small screwdriver to depress on the lever that releases the crown stem. And then we can grab our case and get that prepped to accept the movement. So we'll just remove this ceramic bezel insert as it hasn't been attached yet. Then we'll undo the case back, remove the case back and case back gasket and get ready to clean the crystal. Now I've already given this crystal a good clean for the B-roll shots you saw in the opening sequence for the start of the video. But I always like to be thorough with this step because I'm a little bit OCD when it comes to having dust and dirt under the crystal. So make sure you get your air blower and your lens pen and look super concentrated like I do when you clean the crystal. Now one thing I just remembered is that I actually took the chapter ring out of this watch to modify it. Now the chapter ring that it came with was a dark blue with a minute track painted in silver. Now I didn't really like the way this looked with my dial, as my dial also has a minute track. And I find that when you have a dial and chapter ring with a minute track, it just looks too busy for me. So this case uses an aluminium or titanium chapter ring, I'm not really sure, but either way I was able to get my steel wool and just sand that chapter ring down back to a brushed finish. Now for me personally, I think this looks much better. So to do that required me pressing out the crystal, which allowed me access to the chapter ring, which just lifted straight out. So once we've got the crystal nice and clean, we can pop our movement into the case. Once we align the crown stem hole in the case and the movement, we can get ready to cut our crown stem to the right length. And you can see here, I think it looks really clean with that brushed chapter ring. Really happy with the end result. So now let's get ready to cut our crown stem. So we'll unscrew the crown, remove it from the case and grab our crown stem that comes with the new movement. So lately I've kind of been winging the crown stem length and just been cutting it by eye. Now it's not something that I really recommend doing, but with enough practice it's definitely possible. I also keep a lot of spare crown stems in stock just in case I do cut one too short, which as you can imagine definitely happens. So I always recommend people carry spare crown stems just so if you do cut one too short, you don't have to wait a few weeks for a replacement to arrive. It also takes the pressure off what can be a stressful process. Now once I do cut my crown stem, I like to file the end of it to remove any sharp edges, just so we don't damage any threads inside the crown. So let's do a test fit and see how this is looking. And as you can see, we can't quite screw the crown into the threads yet. We're still about 4 to 5 millimeters too long. So we'll take it back out, cut another 4 to 5 mil off and retry. So this is looking a lot better now. We still have a little bit of play in that crown and we can push it in and screw it down all the way flush into the case. So now we've got that crown stem cut to the perfect length, we'll take it back out one last time, remove the crown and pop some Loctite on those threads. This will just ensure that that crown doesn't wind itself loose. And as usual, just using a medium strength Loctite on those threads, just so we can remove that crown in the future if we ever need to. And always be sure to wipe off any excess Loctite because you definitely do not want that going through your movement. So now that we've put the crown back on the crown stem, we can fit it into the case for the final time. And just double check once you refit that crown that everything operates as it should. You should be able to pull out the crown to all 3 stages, adjust the time, adjust the date, and wind the movement without it catching onto the threads. You should also be able to screw the crown flush against the case. So now we can move on to just about the final step, which is fitting the case back. So we'll grab our case back gasket, pop it into some silicone lubricant, and then fit it into the groove in the case. So one thing I haven't mentioned yet is that this case is made by a brand called Tactical Frog, and they've got their logos engraved on the crown and on the case back. I'd personally prefer if these were sterile, but this is the only company making this style case, so it is what it is. I guess if it really bothered you, you could try sanding and polishing these out, but that might be a project for another day. So we'll just make sure everything's clean and that there's no dust by giving it a last blowout, and then we'll fit our case back. And luckily we can use the same tool that we use on any other Submariner style build to tighten down this case back. And now we have a completed watch head assembly. All we have left is to fit our ceramic bezel insert. So when you purchase the watch case, it comes with some double-sided tape. Now this tape is already cut to the correct size of your bezel insert, which means it's as easy as removing the protective layer, sticking it to the back side of your bezel insert, and then removing the last protective layer and sticking it to the watch case. Now sometimes that's not so easy, so I found the best tool can sometimes be a scalpel to help you remove that protective layer. And this was one of those times where it definitely felt like a real mission trying to get that first layer of tape off. So once you've finally managed to get that layer off, you can go ahead and stick your bezel down. Now I find the best way to do this is by putting the tape on a flat surface and laying the bezel onto it. I find you get much better control this way as opposed to laying the bezel down and putting the tape on top. And then just give it a rub around just to make sure that the tape is nice and firmly attached. And once that's done, we can remove the rest of our backing tape and we'll be left with a small ring of tape on the bezel insert. Then all you need to do is line up that big triangle on the bezel insert with 12 o'clock on the dial and you're good to go. Just press it down nice and firmly with a soft rag just to make sure that you're getting good contact all the way around the bezel insert. And with that marks the completion of the watch. Now all we need to do is fit a watch strap. Now the thing I've come to actually really enjoy about this watch case is those fixed lug bars. Something I've never had on a watch I've owned before, and I was actually a little bit apprehensive about it to start with. But what I've found is that it makes it super easy to change out watch straps. And it also offers really good peace of mind knowing that you're never going to pop out a spring bar and drop your watch, which has happened to me before while doing some physical activity. But let me show you how versatile this watch is and how easy it is to change watch straps. That is it for today's video, guys. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of today's build. To be honest, I wasn't sure about the combination at first. It took a little while, but it has definitely grown on me. That titanium case, so good. If you've liked this video or gotten anything out of it, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and until next time, see you later.